So welcome to my channel. This time I'll talk about panoramic photography. About a year ago I wrote this book and photographed a lot of images for this book using different cameras for the examples in this book. And I'm in the book explaining about how I use the different cameras and how I made panoramic photography. So let's go into the video. In this video I'll only give an overview of how I used the different cameras because for most of them I will make separate videos showing you how exactly to use these cameras and how to get this very nice panoramic look. But here you'll just have just a short view of how I used the different cameras, but I'll go through all of them. So when is an image actually a panoramic image? I don't think there's any specific definition of that, so I'll just introduce what I think of as a panoramic image. An image from a full frame camera is 24 by 36 millimeters in size. That has an aspect ratio of 2:3, and that is not panoramic in my opinion, or in most opinions. I'd say that when you reach around 1 to 2 in aspect ratio, that means that the height is only half of the width of the image. I think we are definitely talking about a panoramic image. But I use a few images in my book that are not quite reaching this definition. So I'm okay with not reaching quite 1 to 2 aspect ratio. But some of the images are even further than 1 to 3 in the aspect ratio, so very wide images. But we'll see a lot of the examples. You'll get the feeling of how I see this. To make my panoramic images, I used a lot of different cameras. I have some of the cameras here so you can see what kind of different cameras I used. One of the most cheap cameras I used was this Sprocket Rocket, which is a very cheap camera, like $50 or something like that, which uses film. So many of the cameras I shot on was using film. It's not very sharp, but it gives some amazing images anyway. Going a bit up, this Horizon Kompakt camera, which is a very weird camera, by the way. When you shoot it, the lens moves across the frame. Going up again a little, I used this Fujica GL690, which is also a film camera using 120 film, whereas the two others used 135mm film. 135 film, which is 35mm film. But this camera uses 120 film and shoots in the format of 6:9. But I used 35mm film in this camera to have this very wide look. It gives a very panoramic look to the image. But I also used digital cameras, and the most expensive digital camera I used was my Hasselblad X1D Mark II. I can't use my new Hasselblad X2D, which doesn't have crop modes, but this one has a mode called Expand mode, which shoots in the same format as the very famous film camera of old days, the Hasselblad Expand film camera. I love this camera for other uses as well, but it's great for shooting panoramic as well. But that's the most expensive camera I used to make big pictures for this book. So let's have a look at the Sprocket Rocket camera. I chose this camera in yellow because then people will think that it's just a toy that I'm playing with, but it's actually a camera. The whole back of the camera comes off, even the one covering the eyepiece, and then you can see the film plane here, which is pretty large. It's 72 times 33 centimeters, millimeters. So it's an aspect ratio of around 1 to 2.3. a very wide image. But the most funny thing about this camera is that when you put film into this, if you remove these, it actually doesn't cover the sprockets, the film sprockets that are advancing the film. So you actually also expose these, and you can get the sprockets into the image, as you will see in my examples. It only has 2 shutter speeds, 1/100th of a second, or bulk mode. So that's the only things you can choose between, and it also has only 2 apertures, I think 10.8 and 16, as far as I remember. Because of the width of the image, although the lens is only 30 millimeters, it gives you a very wide image. You can become very creative with this camera, like in this example where I've exposed the frame 3 times in a row using some different subjects. And you can also exploit the long shutter speeds on this camera, like here, following some kayakers for around a second while they were kayaking past me. But of course you can also just use ordinary exposure, and you can expose without exposing the sprockets, like in this example from the staircase to my first floor. Let's have a look at the Horizon Kompakt camera, this weird camera that is exposing in this funny way. If I set it to its longest shutter speed, look how this behaves. It's said to be around half a second, but I think it's more like 5 seconds, at least from the exposure start at one end of the image to it stops at the other end of the image. So that's quite a weird way to make an exposure. As I have said, it's a very large image size. It's a panoramic image, and the film plane is rounded. It's a convoluted image plane, so it looks like this. So you can actually see it's rounded. So the lens moves past the image during the exposure. Another thing about this camera is that it is able to make several exposures. I haven't advanced the film, but I can take exposure after exposure, so I can make as many exposures as I want to on the same frame. Also a creative way to make images with this camera. this is the cheapest version of this Horizon camera. There's also a Horizon Perfect, which has selectable shutter speeds and selectable apertures. But I've chosen this one because I can make double exposures with it. That's not possible with the Horizon Perfect. So I prefer this model because I do make double exposures very often. So I use that as a creative way to make my pictures. The next camera I want to show you is a complete beast. It's the Mamiya RZ67, which is a former professional camera with changeable lenses, backs that can be changed, and well, viewfinders that you can change. It can change almost everything, but it's also very heavy. On this camera for panoramic photography, well, it uses this image format, which is 6 by 7 centimeters. But I use 220 backs, and I'll come back to that in a more detailed video about this camera and how I use it, why I use these specs. But that's the best when I shoot 135 film, 35mm film in this camera to give me the panoramic images. The lens lineup for this system is quite insane, from fisheye over portrait lenses, macro lenses, to long telephoto lenses. So you can get everything for this camera system. Let's look at some images from this camera. The last camera I want to introduce you to in today's video is the Fujica GL690, which is a beast of a camera with exchangeable lenses from 50mm to 180mm, and it's a rangefinder camera, very much like a Leica camera, but just many times bigger and many times heavier. But in this camera I use 35mm film to make my panoramic images. So let's have a look at the pictures. In a separate video I will show you how I use this camera, how I use it with a 35mm film, and how to shoot with it, so you will have a feeling of how this can be used to make these extremely panoramic images. So that was it for this time. Next time I'll be talking about, among others, these 4 cameras, which are some weird cameras actually. First of all, the Holga pinhole camera that shoots 6 by 12 format, then 2 35mm film cameras that are able to shoot in panoramic mode, and you can actually through the viewfinder see the image in panoramic mode, and then an APS camera. APS, you say, that's a digital camera. No, it's not. It's for these very old film cassettes, which contained a film that resembles 35mm film very much, but they're packed in these special cassettes, and they can't be bought anymore. Well, not from new, but expired film can be bought, and they can't be developed anymore. But I do my own development, so I don't care, and I have a lot of the film lying in my freezer. So looking forward to presenting you with what these cameras can do, and some other cameras as well. So I hope you liked this video, and if you did, please hit the like button, and also subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of this kind of content. So thank you very much for this time. Bye.